The words U.S. Navy SEALs tend to trigger instant images: elite warriors, dark waters, impossible missions, and a level of toughness that almost sounds mythical. But behind the movies, headlines, and pop culture shorthand, the Navy SEALs are actually a very specific answer to a very real historical problem. What happens when a country needs small teams of highly trained individuals who can operate almost anywhere, on land, at sea, and from the air, often quietly, often far from public view? The SEALs weren't created as superheroes. They were created because modern warfare began demanding flexibility over sheer numbers. To understand what the Navy SEALs really are, we have to look past the reputation and into why they exist in the first place. So let's get into it, right here, on History of Simple Things. The roots of the Navy SEALs go back to World War II, long before the name itself existed. During that war, the U.S. military realized that large conventional forces weren't always enough. Before amphibious landings, someone had to secretly survey beaches, remove underwater obstacles, and gather intelligence, often under enemy fire. Specialized units known as Navy Combat Demolition Units and underwater demolition teams were formed to do exactly that. These early swimmers laid the groundwork for what would come later. By the early 1960s, as conflicts became less predictable and more unconventional, the U.S. officially established the Navy SEALs in 1962. Their name reflected their intended environment: sea, air, and land, a clear signal that these units were designed to move seamlessly between all three. At their core, the Navy SEALs are a special operations force, but that label only scratches the surface. Unlike traditional military units that specialize in one domain, SEALs are trained to adapt constantly. They might deploy from submarines, aircraft, or ships, operate in jungles, deserts, mountains, or cities, and work in teams small enough to remain unnoticed. This flexibility is what makes them valuable. Their missions often involve reconnaissance, counterterrorism, direct action, and special reconnaissance, tasks where speed, precision, and discretion matter more than overwhelming force. In many ways, SEALs are less about brute strength and more about problem-solving under extreme pressure. You can't talk about the Navy SEALs without mentioning training, because it's a huge part of why their reputation exists. The most famous portion is Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, commonly known as BUDS. It's physically exhausting, mentally punishing, and designed to test limits rather than create athletes. The goal isn't to find the strongest or fastest person, it's to find individuals who can function when cold, tired, stressed, and uncomfortable for long periods of time. What's often overlooked is that training doesn't stop after initial qualification. SEALs continue learning throughout their careers, constantly adapting to new technology, environments, and mission types. The training pipeline reflects the reality of their work: unpredictable, demanding, and unforgiving. As warfare evolved, so did the role of the Navy SEALs. In the Cold War era, they trained for missions that might never happen, preparing for covert operations behind enemy lines. In more recent decades, their role became more visible due to global conflicts and media coverage. SEAL teams have been involved in operations ranging from counterterrorism to maritime security, often working alongside intelligence agencies and allied special forces. While their missions are typically classified, their strategic value lies in being able to act quickly, gather information, and respond to threats without the footprint of a large military presence. They are not meant to replace conventional forces, but to complement them. Beyond the missions and training, the Navy SEALs have developed a strong internal culture. Teamwork is emphasized heavily. No individual operates alone for long. Trust, accountability, and resilience become necessities rather than ideals. This culture also explains why SEALs tend to avoid self-promotion while still being intensely proud of their identity. The trident insignia they earn represents more than skill. It symbolizes endurance, adaptability, and commitment. For many, becoming a SEAL is less about prestige and more about belonging to a group that shares a very specific mindset. Pop culture has turned the Navy SEALs into larger-than-life figures, but the reality is more grounded. SEALs are highly trained professionals, not invincible action heroes. Their success often depends on preparation, intelligence, planning, and teamwork rather than dramatic firefights. When missions go right, they usually look uneventful from the outside, which is often the point. The mystique surrounding the SEALs exists partly because much of what they do is never made public. What remains visible is the symbol, not the daily reality. In a world where threats can emerge anywhere and change quickly, the Navy SEALs remain relevant because adaptability is their defining feature. They represent a shift in how modern militaries think: smaller, smarter, and more flexible rather than larger and louder. While their missions may evolve with technology and geopolitics, the core idea remains the same: having people who can operate in uncertain environments when conventional solutions fall short. Understanding the Navy SEALs isn't about glorifying combat. It's about understanding how modern history shaped the need for such a force. So what are the U.S. Navy SEALs really? They're not just an elite unit or a Hollywood trope. They're a product of history, shaped by changing warfare and defined by adaptability. Behind the mystique is a practical answer to a complicated world, one where sometimes the most important missions are the ones you never hear about, and that quiet effectiveness might be the most defining trait of all. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.